All right, hello and welcome back to another episode of Just a Girl from Cleveland. This is episode 117. Sorry I did not get an episode out to you last week. I was actually on a work trip for my actual full-time job. And we got back much later than expected with some travel struggles. That whole hurricane thing kind of got in the way for a second. So sorry about that. The week just ended up getting a little too crazy for me. And there's only so many hours in the day, which is something I feel like I tell myself constantly during football season, is just trying to fit everything into every day when you've got football on 4 days a week: Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It gets a little bit crazy, but we love it. We love the game, and I'm so excited to have football back. We are just a couple days away now from Browns Bengals, which is really exciting. But a lot to catch up on this week. There's a few things I want to touch on that happened with the cuts and the getting down to the 53-man roster. I think there were some important takeaways there on things that the Browns did. Want to do a little bit of a Bengals-Browns preview. And then first, I actually want to touch on the Ohio State game against Indiana. So I actually did not get to watch the entirety of this game because I was at my friend's wedding during the game. So was checking the score when I could, as I do during weddings in the fall, during football season. Like that's what people do at weddings in the fall. You check football scores as well. It was a beautiful, lovely wedding. Had so much fun, but also had to check the Buckeye score. So I did get to watch some of the clips afterwards as well. And I don't have like a ton of major takeaways because I think it's hard to find big takeaways. One, early on in the season, especially for college football, and two, playing a inferior opponent. I just think sometimes it's hard to always judge things. Whereas in the NFL, I think no matter what team you're playing, even if you're playing the worst team in the league, you have an idea of who you are and what your identity is. I think it's a little bit harder in college football because the margins between the great teams and the good teams and the okay teams and the bad teams is so wide that it does get a little bit tough. But did want to talk about a couple things from it. So obviously the Buckeyes did end up winning, beat Indiana 23-3. Started off pretty slow. When I was checking the score during this wedding, I'm like, okay, first half, this team usually puts up a couple more touchdowns, but that wasn't happening, which, has been kind of a pattern, I think, for early Buckeye seasons in recent years. I know CJ Stroud, even when he started his career at Ohio State, had some really slow starts to kick off the season, and a lot of people were concerned with him, and then he turns out to be, a incredibly talented, gifted, almost took us to a national championship this past year quarterback who is drafted very high in the first round and is now the starting quarterback for the Houston Texans. So I don't want to judge Kyle McCord's entire identity and what he's going to do at Ohio State on one game because CJ definitely had a slow start as well, and it took him a while to really get his rhythm and get going. I think in general, the takeaway I had offensively was the offense was a bit conservative, and I think this is a problem people have had with Ryan Day at certain points in time, and I'm not sure if he's just doing that to really get Kyle comfortable out there and get him in a rhythm before doing anything crazy. But I think in order to get him comfortable, you kind of just have to let him throw the ball around. And you have Marvin Harrison Jr., the best receiver in all of college football and potentially the best receiver Ohio State has had in a very long time. I think you need to trust a little more and maybe open things up a little bit. I'm willing to give that a little time, though, and see how that evolves in the coming weeks, especially when they play some even lesser opponents in the coming weeks, like a Youngstown State. I think maybe you let him do a little bit more and just get him comfortable doing those things in an actual game situation. Obviously, he's stepped in a couple games over the years when maybe the Buckeyes are up by a lot. They take CJ out. They put Kyle McCord in to play for 5 minutes. I think that's a little bit different than when the entirety of this team and this organization is riding on your shoulders. It wasn't his team at that time when he was going in before. And I think that's a lot of pressure, even though I believe McCord is a junior. I just think once you have the keys to a team like this, it's very intimidating, and you have a lot of grown adults yelling at you when you're still kind of just a kid trying to figure it out. So I think there is a lot of responsibility there, and that's part of what comes with it, being an Ohio State quarterback. But at the same time, I think time and grace as he's getting his feet wet is really beneficial for him in the long run. And in general, we did win 23-3, so I'm not going to overreact to a 20-point win. I think that's still decently solid. That I'm not, we didn't win by one score, so I feel good about that. The other big takeaway from the highlights I watched was the defense looked much better. And obviously that shows in the score, only holding them to 3, because, hey, there were teams that were far inferior to us in the last couple of years. And that team still could not, just hold them to single digits. They would let them get those big plays and get those big scores, and it would keep bad teams in games with this team. So I think it was nice to see the defense be able to just hold their own in that way, and looked a lot more aggressive and just faster, stronger, all of those things in general. So I feel good about that. We don't really have a big matchup, I would say, until Notre Dame, which is, I think, the 4th week, maybe very end of September. So just kind of getting everyone comfortable till then, I think, is going to be the main priority. Okay. Oh, the other thing not related to this, that as I was chaotically trying to start recording this, I spilled my hot tea like all over myself. And that just really sums up my chaotic day / life during football season. Is just, you're in too much of a rush and you spill your hot tea over yourself. But it happens. We're all good now. So here and happy to talk football instead. Okay, so now let's get into some Browns. So I want to first talk about some 53-man roster cutdown stuff. And then, like I said, Bengals-Browns preview. So right before the 53-man cutdown day happens, the Browns make an unexpected trade of trading Josh Dobbs to the Cardinals for a 5th-round pick. I don't think they were expecting for this to happen. I don't think they were expecting to give up Josh like that, but they also weren't expecting someone to call and offer a 5th-round pick for a quarterback that might have even been the 3rd string on their team, with how well DTR had played during the preseason and proven that he could handle it. I think they had really no other choice but to take that call and say, yeah, we'll send him right away. And I'm happy for Dobbs, because I think he's going to have a real chance to play in Arizona and get some time with the chaotic situation with Kyler Murray. I think there's a real shot for him there. So I think it was kind of best for everyone. I know everyone loves Josh Dobbs. He seems like a really nice guy, but we can't be the organization that is just keeping people because they're nice and we like their story. I think that's wonderful, and I love enjoying the stories of people in sports. It's one of my favorite parts about being a sports fan, but as an organization, you can't live and die by that. And I think it's good that we're just making smart moves and still doing things in the right way. But when the opportunities present themselves, jumping on them and making something out of a situation where nothing was there. And now you have a 5th-round pick that you recouped, which could really technically be, I think, when we got Za'Darius, I want to say that was a 5th-round pick. So there's little moves here and there that you're recouping picks, maybe getting a pick here or there that makes up for things. I think that's a really big deal and shows how smart this front office is and their ability to make those types of moves. So I hope the best for Josh Dobbs, but I think that was good. And for me, it was inevitable that DTR was going to be QB2. It was always going to be the way. I think he really proved it during preseason, wildly talented, has plenty of experience from college ball that I don't think you need to see a ton more to at least trust that he can handle the backup role. So I feel good about that. Another big thing that happened was Cade York has been cut. We've been on a journey on this show and just in my life with Cade York. I was an early proponent for drafting Cade York. I'm really second guessing my whole thought process on kickers and special teams. I just hated how it was ruining this team repeatedly. Season after season, we were losing because of kickers, where I was like, let's just solve it and draft a kicker. And, maybe with another guy it could have worked. I think Cade ended up just getting way too much in his head, and it was a big mental struggle for him. But I really feel like maybe it's just too much pressure to draft a kicker and have the expectations be so high that you used a draft pick on them. Whereas it's a lot easier for a guy that you didn't use a pick on to come in and not have that same level of pressure. I think it just it becomes a little too much. So might be rethinking my ideas on drafting a kicker. I still think kickers are important, and I still think kickers have the ability to affect games. But yeah, maybe let's stay away from drafting one for at least a while, until maybe like a couple years from now. Maybe we have another round of bad kickers and I'm like, well, I don't know, we could take one this year. So we'll see where my thought process goes. So yeah, that was another just honestly massive change in general. Our new kicker is Dustin Hopkins, veteran. I think that's what we needed at the position. Needed someone who's been here, done that, is not going to be so intimidated by the moment. And I think that was probably the best move. And I was genuinely happy to see, as much as I wanted Cade to succeed, happy to see the front office act on it. I know people wanted it sooner, which I don't quite understand, because it's not like there are an abundance of kickers just waiting on the market. I think you needed to wait till things got closer to the cut down day to see what other guys were going to actually hit the market, rather than just pick up someone that's maybe not as talented. So I think they did everything at the right time. People just get a little bit impatient. There is a process to all of this. So I feel pretty good about that. And then just like quick highlights from the last preseason game that I didn't get to talk about because I didn't record. I thought DeSean looked a lot better. He had some really nice throws to Amari, touchdown to David, nice throw to DPJ. So I saw some good moments where he was able to flash with a lot of his pass catchers. Juan Thornhill had an interception against his old team, which felt really good. And then I think the defensive front in general just looked extremely fast and quick. When they had those starters in, you could notice that, and it felt like a real difference from last year. And I know it was preseason, but it was a stark contrast from what we've seen before. And I think it did exactly what we've been talking about, which is if you have more talented edge guys, defensive tackles, that opens things up for the linebackers in ways that it didn't before. And we saw early in that game, it really allowed JOK to fly around on the field more, which I definitely appreciated seeing and hope that translates to the regular season, but it was definitely good to see in the preseason. So when we get to 53-man roster cutdown day, a couple notable things. One, Austin Watkins did not make the initial 53. I really had hoped he would. I understand why he didn't. I don't think it's like the end of the world. We're complaining about 6th, 7th, 8th guys on the depth chart. It's not that big of a deal. It really doesn't affect much of what this team is going to do at the end of the day. I think it's a fun story for a lot of people, and I really enjoyed his story. I loved watching him in the preseason. And the great news is he's back on the practice squad, so we still have him in Cleveland. Look, injuries can happen. Like, I know Marquise Goodwin is back, which is great and very exciting. I think that offers the Browns a deep threat, a speed guy that they didn't have before. So I'm really happy about that. But I don't think, I'm not surprised that Watkins ended up back here. I thought maybe another team would want him, but wasn't completely shocked by it. But I'm happy he is here just in case something happens with another guy. We have someone that we feel like could potentially step up in their position. It's a long season. Injuries happen. It could be there. They did only keep 6 receivers on the active roster. I thought they might keep 7. So that did surprise me a little bit, but we have some guys on the practice squad that I feel like if they need to come in can do that. Diabate and Hickman, which were my 2 other kind of exciting picks that I really wanted to make the 53, both did make it. Cool stories, man, like undrafted, showed up and just gave it their all and just proved it. They made it impossible to not keep them based on how well they played, which is really cool. Hickman out of Ohio State, Diabate out of Utah. And I think those are some of the best stories in the NFL, just guys being able to prove themselves in that way. So really happy for both of them. And then recently they actually released the depth chart that is kind of this initial depth chart going into this week. And there wasn't anything too crazy on there. The only thing that stood out to me is that Jordan Elliott was ahead of Shelby Harris on the depth chart. I don't know what this organization really sees in Jordan Elliott. I think that's one that still really confuses me. I'm not sure if he's just some phenomenal practice player. If Jim Schwartz walked in and felt like he really saw something there, I'm not sure what it is, but that did kind of surprise me. Now, I'm not sure how much weight I want to carry with that on what's going to happen come week one or come any game this season for that matter, in terms of like how many snaps each guy is going to be getting and what, their usage on the field is going to look like. But I will say, a little bit surprised to see that one. If, anything surprised me, I would say it was that. Everything else pretty standard. There's not too many shocks. We have a very solid full roster, where, your starters, some have been here for a really long time, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Like, that offensive line has been intact and ready to go. You still got Nick Chubb there at RB1. You still got a lot of the receivers that have been here for a couple years, with some new faces as well. You still got Myles Garrett. There's still a lot of those pieces. So it was just adding some more solid depth, and I feel really good about what I'm seeing there. Okay. Now for Browns-Bengals preview, because we are a few short days away. I'm so excited. First of all, it's going to be such a fun day in Cleveland. Like, if you have the ability to, you should even just come downtown to experience the Muni Lot, experience the city. I think it's going to be packed. It's going to be crazy. I'm just really excited for the energy downtown. It's my favorite is when downtown feels like that. Sometimes it gets a little quieter down here. So it'll feel good to see the city full of football fans again. I'm really excited. Okay, so some thoughts going into this game. I'm just going to kind of rattle through everything that I'm feeling, thinking, predictions, all of that. We'll start with Joe Burrow. So Joe Burrow just recently came back from his calf strain, I believe was his calf injury, that kind of lingered for a while this summer. I don't know a ton about calf injuries, but I know they can definitely linger longer than expected. So I'm interested to see if there's still a part of him that is dealing with some issues from that, or if he is totally, fully 100% looks good come game time. I think it's interesting that he, once again, did not have time to really have a summer and work with his team, his receivers, his offensive line. I'm not necessarily worried about the relationship with his receivers because he's had so much time now with Jamar and T, especially Jamar because he had college with him as well. Like, they've had a lot of years together, and I feel like they're going to be a solid group. I just think sometimes the Bengals will come out a little bit slow to start the season, and I wonder if some of that has to do with the fact that Joe has, had to deal with a variety of injuries and different issues. I think last summer he had appendicitis or something. I don't know. Something crazy happened last summer and he was out for a little bit. So there's always something going on with Joe in the summer that I think it does actually affect what the team does early on in the season. And I'll be interested to see if they come out a little bit slow week one, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And just in general, if the offensive line for the Bengals is able to protect him enough, like that, even as they've added more pieces, they added Orlando Brown Jr., you still have questions about what that's going to look like because Joe is the type of quarterback that needs some more protection. Like, I know he still makes plays, but he's a guy that's going to take a lot of sacks, and that is going to affect what they can do offensively. So interested to see what they look like as well. For them on the defensive side of the ball, I thought Lou Anarumo was going to maybe get a head coaching job this offseason because he's done a really good job with the Bengals defense, but he is still there. And they've had a little bit of turnover, especially in their secondary. So I am curious to see if he is the type of coordinator that just kind of overcomes everything and is able to make something out of nothing, kind of like a Bill Callahan on the Browns with the Browns offensive line, where it's like he could take any mid player. Like, he's gonna take Alex Leatherwood, who the Browns just added to their practice squad, who was a first round pick 2 years ago and was moved from, I think, the Raiders to the Bears and then just got cut. We pick him up and put him on our practice squad because we know Bill Callahan can make magic out of former first-round picks that didn't work out. I think Lou Anarumo could maybe be a coordinator in a way like that, where he can take mediocre talent and really make it something great as a unit because of what he is able to do with his defensive scheme and how he knows to run things in this organization. So I'm interested to see if that is the case for them continuing into this year, because they've been able to really hold it together the last few seasons with, not really the top talent in the league. So props to Lou, and I hope someone hires him as a head coach so he can get out of the AFC North. I would very much enjoy that. All talent, please leave the AFC North immediately. Okay, so then for the Browns, I think the big question, obviously, is always going to be, until we see what it looks like in these regular season games, is DeSean Watson. The questions obviously continued after last season, his lackluster performances in those 6 games. He has looked, fine all summer. There's not much to say about what happens in training camp. I don't get obsessed over training camp throws. I just don't think it means that much. I do think there were good things that we saw in the preseason of moments he was able to flash. So that does give me some hope, but I want to see it in these regular season games to really believe that he has at least come close to what he was in 2020. He doesn't have to fully be that, but come a little bit closer, I think would be a big win for this team and would really make them a true contender because of the rest of the talent that they have on this roster. So obviously we'll be looking for that week 1. What do they do? The Browns have a good history against the Bengals in the last 5 or so years. They've won 8 out of the last 10 matchups that they've played against that team. So, there's a lot of success we've had there. And I think we game plan well against AFC North teams. So hoping that follows with DeSean now, because I know DeSean did lose his game against the Bengals last season that he was able to play in. So interested to see if he's able to kind of correct that and play them a little bit better this year. I'm interested to see definitely how the defense looks, both the line and the secondary. I think I want to see our pass rushers able to get after Joe Burrow? Are they able to get some sacks or even just good pressure in general, make him nervous, make him have to throw the ball, make him have to scramble around? Like, I want to see a lot of that happening because I think the talent is definitely there. So it should be happening against a team like this. Absolutely. Also, the secondary, curious to see, because although a lot of our corners are the same, we have some new safeties in the mix. We've got Juan Thornhill, we've got Rodney McLeod. They have some not only veteran leadership, but from especially Juan Thornhill's perspective, being on a championship team last year, he has some championship experience. So what that leadership brings to this locker room and that group, the confidence it gives them, do they not have those early miscommunications that they had last season early on against the Jets? And honestly, in many moments, there were blown coverages, especially early on, and it did continue really till the end of the season, but affected the ability to win games early on. I mean, that Jets game in a lot of ways was decided on those defensive miscommunications, in my opinion, which we don't have to go back to that. I don't want to cover that whole game again, but it was a big deal, and I think it really defined what changes the Browns needed to make on that side of the ball. So really interested to see how the secondary looks with some of those new faces in it in general. Offensively, other than DeSean, there's not a ton of changes, like Nick Chubb back, still going to be Nick Chubb, not really concerned about that. The offensive line hopefully stays healthy. I know there were some issues with the offensive line staying healthy at the end of this last season, so hoping that they continue to stay healthy to start this season and look like that top 5 unit that we have known them to be for many years now, with a lot of the same faces there. We still have got our pro bowlers, well, at least definitely Pro Bowler Joel Bitonio. Wyatt Teller's been a Pro Bowler. You've got a lot of talent there, so hoping that continues. But I'm really excited. Like I said, I hope everyone, if you can, come up to Cleveland for week 1. I will probably be in the Muni lot, so if you see me, say hi. I'm so, so excited. Football is back. It feels so good. You can feel the crisp in the air. Not really. You could for like a week and then it got 85 and scorching hot again. So totally not always feeling the crisp in the air, but I'm sure the football energy will cause me to feel it coming up here as the week goes on. I'm really excited for it. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please, please, please leave a rating, a review, subscribe not only on Apple and Spotify, but on the YouTube. Please subscribe on the YouTube. It would mean so much to me. I very much appreciate it. All of the support. It means a lot. Thank you guys for listening, and go Browns.